Hey everybody, good evening. It's good to see you all today. This first day of August. Can y'all believe the year is going by this fast? It's good to see you all. Amen. When you're logging on, just wave at me or something. Let me know you're there. Let me know where you're logging in from. It's always good to spend time with you guys. You can actually start tagging your friends and sharing the video as well. We want to share this teaching with as many as we can. I think this is going to be really eye-opening on tonight. So if you would help me with getting this word out. It's good to see everybody. Hey Sarah, so good to see you. Thank you for this topic, by the way. I hope we do it justice tonight. You know how we normally do, we'll give folks just a few minutes to find us or to get settled and get logged in, and then we'll go ahead and start sharing. And those who don't get an opportunity to be with us live, of course, they'll catch the replay. Hey, Brother Kevin, it's good to see you, man. It's good to see you. All right, in about one more minute, we'll go ahead and dive in. Kevin says, where are the people? I don't know. Maybe they're out school shopping. I don't know, for getting ready to go back to school. I know the kids here are going back here maybe in the next week or so. Maybe they're just out enjoying this great weather. I know it's nice and hot here in Texas. They'll catch it on the replay. I know when I was pastoring a church, it was always challenging to get people to come to church in the summertime. And so maybe it's something similar here. I don't know. But we trust we're going to get this information out here. And when folks have time, they'll come back and look at it. I'm always surprised when I go and look at the numbers on YouTube. Folks do go back and watch it. So, hey everybody, I see you logging on. It's good to see you. All right, if you would, go ahead and share the video, tag some of your friends, and let them know that we're getting ready to shake the table tonight, okay? All right. Well, I want to go ahead and honor your time and honor that you are here and get ready to share what we have for you. I'm actually pretty excited tonight to deal with the topic that we are tackling on tonight. It's really very interesting. Last week, I'm kind of a news junkie. Whether it is I'm watching the news on television or I'm reading some news article. And this past week, another local pastor of a rather large church here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area resigned. Basically, he was forced to resign for some undisclosed reason. I don't know. But it was along with the rash of resignations that we've been seeing here of pastors in some really large churches. And so it really struck me, and it had just really kind of been in my thoughts for a while. And then one of my classmates from TCU, from Bright, Sarah Martinez, she reached out to me just to kind of get my thoughts about it. And it was so odd when she did. It just seemed like a confirmation or a conviction to really pray about this and dig into it. And then for us to really discuss what's going on in this megachurch movement. I think it's important. I think those of us who, in some sort of way, might be connected to Christianity and the American church, to really understand what's going on in our midst. And here on Shake the Table, we've created a space to be able to really talk about these things, maybe in ways that others are not talking about. This is a place to think together and to maybe deconstruct some things, pull them apart so that we can rebuild whatever Spirit gives us to rebuild in healthy kinds of ways, with healthy theologies and healthy doctrines and healthy relationships with our pastors and pastors with laity, those kinds of things. And so I believe that having this conversation tonight really moves the needle forward. I think it really maybe will help to heal some people, maybe who were parts of mega churches. And I don't want to frame that to say that mega churches are bad. That's not the context of this conversation at all. But what I'm wanting to do is really lift up the fact that things are changing. Church doesn't look today in 2024 the way that it looked back in 1994. Are you all understanding what I'm saying? Has anybody recognized that besides me? Church is different these days. And I think there are really there are reasons for that. And again, those of us who are thinkers, those of us who love the church, those of us who may be leaders in the church, I think it is incumbent upon us to really understand sometimes why things are different. Okay, so you understanding why we're here and why we're going to talk about this? Okay, all right, so as I always do, I took some time to really think about this and to study it. And I tried to write some notes down that, first of all, would keep me on track, because I always have a lot of thoughts about a lot of things, and it's easy to really go down a rabbit hole, and I don't want to do that. I want to keep our conversation in a way that is easy for us to digest and understand, and even be able to take later on and go back and do some maybe reading and research for ourselves. Okay, so I made some notes, and I want really, I guess, more than anything, for you to understand why we're doing this. Again, most of us that are, we're either Christians on this live, we maybe used to be Christians, or in some sort of way we're familiar with Christianity or Christian practices or some way like that. And as we continue to navigate this thing that we call Christendom, as we continue to live day by day, it's important that we're able really to recognize and kind of understand what is going on spiritually and in terms of religiosity. We need to be able to discern the times. That's what I want to say. We've got to be able to see what's going on in our midst and not allow us to just pass us by. We've got to be able to see it. And I believe that when we are unaware when we are uninformed or uneducated about something, it makes us vulnerable. When we are not aware of something that might be a threat to us, we could become victims of that thing. And, again, I'm talking to a mature people. I'm talking to a very aware people. There are a lot of folks, some of us right here, who have been victims of church systems. We have been victims of doctrines and dogmas and ways of doing things that we weren't aware of. And we didn't figure the thing out until it was too late. Don't tell me the car is coming after the car already hit me, And so having these kinds of conversations on Shake the Table every month give us an opportunity to really discuss things that are relative to this life that we're living out in or around Christianity or the church. Okay. And so, different theologies and doctrines and traditions and all of that kind of stuff, we got to be able to talk about them so that we understand them. And so tonight, dealing with this particular topic about the mega church and how it touches our lives is something that hopefully I can do some justice to it. Okay, so I believe that anytime you have a conversation about any subject, you really need to define it. It's important that we know what we're talking about when we say mega church. Okay, and so the Hartford Institute for Religion and Research defines a mega church as any church that sees 2,000 or more attendees in a weekend. Because some churches have services on Saturday, some have it on Sunday, some do it on both. Okay, so any church that sees 2,000 or more attendees on a weekend. Okay, a mega church is generally, well, I should say not generally. A mega church is a Protestant church, because there are some very large Catholic churches as well that are over that 2,000 mark, but those churches don't really fall into quote unquote the mega church that we're going to talk about today. So the mega church is Protestant. For the most part, it is evangelical. And what I mean by that, because there are evangelical white churches and there are evangelical black churches. There are evangelical Latinx churches. Those things mean different things, I guess, in terms of their connotation, in terms of their social locations. But evangelical simply means that it is the intention of that church to grow the church, the local church and the church universal, or to grow the kingdom by sharing the message of Jesus Christ. Okay. There's some other things that go into that, just in terms of their beliefs about conversion or being born again and all of that kind of thing. But basically, mega churches are evangelical. They go out and they evangelize to bring people into the church. Okay. The next thing that we need to know about this mega church phenomenon or this mega church movement is that most mega churches are located either here in the United States, in Australia, or in Africa. That's where most of those 2,000 plus attendee churches are. Again, United States, Australia. I know it seems kind of weird. There are big churches in Australia, but there are. And Africa. As a matter of fact, Africa has seen an explosion of mega churches. Whereas we're going to discuss here in the United States how it is on the decline. There are places in the global South, whether it is in Africa or South America, where these Pentecostal or neo-Pentecostal megachurches are actually getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so when I talk about the death or the decline of the megachurch, I guess I should put in parentheses in the U.S. because it's not declining everywhere. Okay. So again, 2,000 or more attendees on a weekend. Normally, it's a Protestant evangelical church, and it's normally going to be located here in the United States, in Australia, or in Africa. Now, in the United States, it's really very interesting that most mega churches are located in just 4 states. Most of them are in just 4 states. They are in Georgia, Florida, California, and here in Texas. It kind of makes sense when you think about, where the folks live and the big population centers or whatever. But so Georgia, Florida, California, and Texas are generally where you're going to find a lot of these big old mega churches. Okay. In 2015, they did some research. I don't know if they've updated. If they have, I haven't been able to find it. But there is something actually that is called a Giga church. So mega church is 2,000 or more people that show up on a weekend. Well, a Giga church, like a gigabyte or something, a Giga church is one where 10,000 people show up on a weekend. And believe it or not, according to that study, I'm sure it's different now, post-COVID, there were 100 Giga churches in the United States where 10,000 or more people were showing up for church every weekend. Now, there's a whole lot of stuff that I could talk about here with all of these big giant churches, with all of these multi-million-dollar facilities and all of this kind of stuff. But the United States is still racist, is still sexist. It is still greedy and doesn't take care of the poor and the hungry and the widows. I could talk about all of those kinds of, I am talking about those things. But I think it is an irony that we have this big mega church phenomenon and these big mega churches with multi-million-dollar budgets all over the country, but we still have all these social ills. And I'll talk about in a moment why that's one of the reasons that mega churches are on the decline. Because people recognize that. People see, wait a minute, you got this big giant church sitting in this area and there's poverty all around it. That doesn't make sense to me. Is there anybody that knows what I'm talking about? Anybody ever had that feeling before? It's like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. Why is the pastor doing so well, but maybe the congregants aren't doing so well? Again, these are reasons that people have pointed out that the church might be in decline. But I want to stay on my notes, okay? I get very passionate about this stuff because I think about it a lot. Again, as a lifelong Christian, as a minister for almost 30 years, as a pastor for almost 15 years, these are things that I think about a lot. And there are times, my heart gets very heavy because the church can be a wonderful, wonderful tool of being able to share God's love. It can be an amazing instrument of what I call present day salvation. Saving someone from hunger, saving someone from poverty, saving someone from oppression. Not waiting until they get to heaven, but when we all come together in these 2,000, member gatherings, we can do a lot of things, but unfortunately, too many times that doesn't get done. But let me press on. It would seem to a lot of us that, the whole idea of the mega church is something that's relatively new. But it has a pretty old history. It is said that the mega church, the very first mega church, was founded in 1861 in London, in England, by Charles Spurgeon. It says that he had a 6,000 seat auditorium in London in 1861. The first mega church in the United States was actually founded by a woman. Her name is Amy Semple, Semple, S-E-M-P-L-E, McPherson. She founded the church. It was called Angela's Temple in L.A. back in 1923. And they had like an auditorium that was over 5,000. So way back in 1923, this lady who was very, very popular on the radio built this church. And so the megachurch, although it really began to get really popular like in the 80s and 90s and so forth, it's actually got a pretty long history. Before I go forward, I want to point out an irony. Because again, we're talking about how the megachurch, that whole idea of it, is dying out. Okay. Remember, I said the very first megachurch was in England in 1861. Today, England is very secular. Very few people are regular church goers. Okay. Not just in England, but all across Europe. People just don't go to church the way that they used to. And I believe that there was an awakening, an understanding of what the church was in terms of how maybe it used people or oppressed people, and people just started to pull away. And so as we have seen the perspective about church, the attendance of church wane or decrease or diminish in Europe, I read over 20 years ago that same thing was going to begin to happen here in the United States, and we are actually living it now. Okay. And so, like I said, the history of it is pretty long, but it started to get really popular back in the 80s and 90s. And I think it had a lot to do with televangelism. So the preachers who would get television time and go on, their churches would get real big. Do y'all remember Robert Schuller? Are y'all old enough to remember him? The Crystal Cathedral used to come on television when you were at your grandmother's house, and he would come on, and he would have all the celebrities and stuff come, and they would give words and things like that. And it was out in California. People like Oral Roberts, who was a very, very popular televangelist, pastor of Megachurch. People like Reverend Ike up in New York. Okay. You can't lose with the stuff we use. Reverend Ike had a very, very popular television ministry, and his church was very big. John Osteen, y'all are familiar with Joel Osteen down in Houston at Lakewood now, but I grew up in Houston. And as a little boy, John Osteen, John and Dodie Osteen, who were Joel Osteen's parents, were on television and had a huge church in Houston. And that's what Joel came on and kind of built upon. Even, my spiritual father, Carlton Pearson, ended up with, a mega church in Tulsa, Oklahoma that was multiracial. But again, my pastor, my, spiritual father was connected to Oral Roberts. He traveled with him. He sang with him. He was on television. And so these people were able to take these television personalities and parlay them into these big growing churches. Okay. And so in the 80s and 90s, that was really very popular. TBN, Trinity Broadcasting Network, you would see Jim Baker and all of them, and it just spurred this thing, and people just started going to church. And so that's when these mega churches got really big. And so again, Oral Roberts and Jerry Falwell and John Osteen and all of that. Today we got people like T.D. Jakes and Joel Osteen, and we've got Rick Warren out in California. We got Andy Stanley in Atlanta that have these like mega massive 30 and 40 and 50,000 member churches. But guess what? Most of these folks were all men. And I bring that up for a reason. These, we call them churches, but the truth is many times they are empires. They are conglomerates. They are multi-million-dollar businesses with corporate structures, with power brokers, with very power-hungry people and sometimes egomaniacal men at the helm. And I bring this up because it is important for us to recognize, somebody just brought up Hillsong. Yeah, Brian Houston in Sydney, Australia is another one of those. He's not in the U.S., but Hillsong was huge. And they actually started planting churches really all over the world. But we're going to talk about Brian Houston in just a moment, okay? But again, I bring up that these almost unfathomably large corporations, churches that are making all of this money, that are not paying any taxes, that have many times these cults of personality that are being formed around these very powerful men. We have to understand how that has affected Christendom. Because there are a whole lot of folks, again, like I said, that got into these positions and they did that sometimes in very, very unhealthy kinds of ways. Okay? And sometimes when things grow, when they get large, you know, we look at them and we say, oh, that's very successful because it's large. I had a deacon, actually my brother, Danny Harris. I don't know if he'll see this, but he said something to me years ago. This is when I was still pastoring in Atlanta. He said, because we were talking about church growth and everything. And he was like, Pastor, we need to be careful because everything that's big is not healthy. He says sometimes things are large because they are swollen. And when things are swollen, it indicates that it is infected. And that blew me away. Because the truth is that some of these large churches are large, not because they're healthy, but because they are swollen and there is an infection inside of them. And I think that is one of the reasons that we are seeing now that many of these churches are in decline. Because people have started to see that they were infected and started to kind of let some of the pus out, so to speak. But again, I digress. I want to move on to something here, because one would say, you know, why do these churches get so big? How did they get so big when others did not? Okay. And again, I told you in a lot of ways, these churches really took on like corporate growth structures and initiatives and marketing campaigns. And they did all the things that big corporations do to draw in customers. And I want to say that the reason many of these churches were large is because the members were customers. They came with a consumerist perspective. They came to church for what they could get. And again, I don't want to make that a bad thing necessarily, because we go to church because we are in need of something, maybe spiritually or relationally. Okay. But again, people got to a place where they were not looking for a church where they could connect to a mission. They were looking for a church where their flesh could be filled, where the tangibles, the accoutrements of the church is what drew them. What do I mean by that? I mean things like a lot of these mega churches will offer like educational classes or opportunities. They will offer social activities. They will offer a children's church, you know, this big grand thing where children could come and they would, entertain the children. The truth is many of them, you know, would put whole production staffs together so that the lights and the smoke and the music, it was like a rock concert on Sunday mornings. So they were coming to be entertained. You know, they had coffee shops out in the lobby. They had affinity groups where you could travel together. All of these things many times were put in place to draw people and to appeal to that consumerist perspective. Okay. And so these churches got big. Some of the other draws, when you got 3 or 4 or 5 or 10,000 people showing up on a Sunday, it's easy to just kind of, I don't know, go in with the herd and out with the herd and not be seen, or not challenged to have to volunteer or work. You could really kind of skate under the radar. And for a lot of people, particularly maybe who had come from a family church or a smaller church, or who had been maybe overly involved and burned out, they wanted a church where they could go and not be bothered. I did that for a season of my life. I was a member of a mega church in Atlanta, and I just went to church on Sunday. I gave my tithe and offering, and I left. Okay. So for many folks, it's just easier to go to these kinds of churches because nothing is really required of you. You're just another number out in a sea of thousands of others. And so that's a draw for many people. For a lot of other folks, it's convenient because some of these mega churches, I don't know how they do in other places in the country, but here in Texas, many of these mega churches are like franchises. You'll have one church, but they'll have 5 or 6 or 7 campuses in one metropolitan area. We have several churches like that here in Dallas-Fort Worth. I'm not going to call them off because, again, like I said, I'm not trying to speak negatively of these churches because, you know, some of them maybe are doing great work. But, again, church changed. Church is different now, okay? And so again, the point that I am making is that you can be a part of a church, but you never have to go to the main location because there is a campus that's in the suburb where you live. So it was convenient. So again, all of these things that corporations do, all of these things that these companies that sell products do, many of these churches have taken on the same business practices, okay? And that's how they've grown. Now, the other thing I want to say about a draw to these churches, and this really appeals to sometimes maybe the lowest part of us, but sometimes these churches get big because it's just the place to be. It's the in crowd. To be able to say, oh, I'm a member of such and such in church, you know, is popular. It's the same reason some people go to Starbucks or go to Chick-fil-A or something, just to be a part of the crowd. Okay. And again, I could call the name of a whole bunch of churches, some here, some in some other cities, where it's like a badge of honor to say, I'm a member of this church. Like there is certain social status or prestige that comes along with it. Anybody ever meet anybody like that or experience that? That this church is the it church. It's the hot church this season. And so for all of those reasons, these very, very large churches draw people in. Now, I want to talk also about some of the criticisms of these mega churches. Very, very, very valid criticisms. Al Sharpton, whom I admire for many different reasons. Some of you may judge me for that, but I've had the opportunity to be up close to Al Sharpton. And so I admire him for many different reasons. But one of the things that I most admire about him is that he does not bite his tongue. He says what he sees, and then he lets the chips fall where they may. That's a table shaker to me. Amen? Amen. But Al Sharpton, he did an interview back in 2005. And they were talking about the megachurch movement. And he said that he was critical of many megachurches because they were focused on the wrong thing, he believed. He said that a lot of these churches, again, they're Protestant, many times Pentecostal or neo-Pentecostal, charismatic, evangelical churches. He said they focus too much on people's bedrooms. He said bedroom issues, things like same-sex marriage or same-gender relationships or abortion, things that basically were personal to people. He said these mega churches many times were always talking about purity culture and all of these other things, but they neglected to talk about things like social justice. They neglected to talk about, things like the prison industrial complex and homelessness and racism and all of these kinds of things. And so he was critical that they had all of these budgets, they had all of these people and all of this ability, but they were not talking about the things that were really for the uplift of the entire society. Okay, so that was his criticism. He said also that they never talked about the immorality of war. And again, so many of these things I could really dig into, but that was one of the criticisms. Another criticism of many people is that many mega churches focus too much on what is called a prosperity gospel. Now, I could take some time and really preach and teach about what prosperity gospel is, because the truth is the gospel of Jesus Christ is about prospering, but it's not just about money and prosperity in terms of driving a BMW or having a big house in the suburbs. Not that prosperity gospel, okay? But a lot of the mega churches are, hey, you give an offering, God is going to bless you, and you're going to be rich just like the preacher, okay? Your faith is going to make you wealthy. And so many of these churches, again, were built and lots and lots and lots of money was transacted based upon this prosperity gospel. And that's one of the great criticisms that people, maybe who were struggling already, struggling to pay their bills every month, would be encouraged, to give and give and give, believing that all of this beautiful stuff and all of these wealthy people that they see around them, they would become that if they would just give. Professor Scott McKnight, he teaches at the Northern Baptist Theological Seminary. He criticized many of the mega churches that are outside of large denominations, because some mega churches are within, your denominations, but probably about half of them are outside of a denominational structure. And Dr. McKnight's criticism was those that are outside of those denominational structures many times don't have any external accountability. Their leaders just do whatever. There's no accountability. And so his concern was that it would expose many of these leaders to this enticement to abuse power. Okay. Remember, I told you many times these mega churches, even some of the smaller churches, are run by people who have really large, unhealthy egos. But I want to say, when you get to a place where you've literally got millions of dollars and thousands of people at your disposal who, because they now see you as this high and lifted up personality, and there's a cult formed around you, that power is almost absolute. And when you get to a place where you have absolute power, I can't remember the saying, it's like, it's something about how it corrupts you. I forget exactly how it goes. If somebody can remember that, put it in the chat. Okay, but absolute power can corrupt even the strongest of people. And that's what has happened in a lot of these churches. So I started, this is the stuff that I've seen with my own eyes. Again, I've been in church my whole life. Okay. Seen the mega churches, been a part of a mega church. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Thank you, Taylor. I knew somebody would have it. Okay. Thank you, Brother Roderick. Y'all got it. Thank God for my brothers. Amen. And so again, some of these things I've seen and experienced for myself, but I wanted to dig a little bit to see what other people had to say, the other perspectives that folks may have concerning this. And so I went to look at the decline of mega churches and kind of see why. What were people saying? First, you could probably imagine there are just some generational shifts that are going on. Pretty innocuous. Younger folks just think about church differently these days. They're not as traditional. They don't feel as compelled, to be at Big Mama's church. And again, I'm finding this out in my own pastoral and ministerial experience. People are looking for more personalized spiritual paths. Is that making sense to anybody? Is that true for any of you? Instead of being a part of this big giant group with group think and no individuality, people are looking for more personalized ways to commune with God and understand God and grow spiritually. And so for them, they're kind of turned off by those large crowds. They're turned off by the politics and the power struggles and the hypocrisy and all of the other things sometimes that comes with large groups. And so there's just this generational shift away from institutionalized religion. So that was one reason. Another reason, and this is from this article, actually, I read, it's called The Decline of Religion in American Life. It was put together by the Pew Research Center, which, I do a lot of, look at their stuff a lot. But there's some cultural changes. Like I said, it happened in Europe. It's happening now where we are becoming more secular. Whereas probably 70% of people back in the 1970s identified as Christian, they just don't anymore. They may consider themselves spiritual. They may consider themselves non-religious. They may consider themselves, naturist or atheist, or they picked another, religious path that may be African spirituality. The culture has just shifted. We are more pluralistic. We believe different things, and we're not ashamed to say that we believe different things. And so because of that, some of the people who were regular attendees at many of these mega churches don't go to anybody's church anymore, or may not even identify as Christians any longer. It's just a shift in the culture, okay? Another reason is economic factors, okay? It costs a lot of money to run these big old churches. And it's a shame, to be honest with you, that we spend so much money on buildings and entertainment and salaries. Most of the money that's collected on Sundays is not used to actually feed the hungry and clothe the naked and house those who are unhoused. Most of the money is not used for that. It's used to continue this cycle, this organization, this institution. Pastor salaries, admin salaries, musician salaries, building buildings and doing all of this kind of stuff. I remember in my first church plan, I read a book called The Purpose-Driven Church. It's by Rick Warren, who pastors Saddleback out in Orange County, which is a mega church. But one of the things that he said in that book, when you're planning a church, is to be mindful to not spend a lot of your budget on your location, on your building. Try to find ways to save money there so that you can actually use money to do ministry. Okay? Well, these mega churches, again, they're collecting all of these millions of dollars, but the lion's share of it is not actually going to make life better for people. And so many of those economic concerns, issues, constraints, challenges have led to a decline because people just can't manage these buildings any longer. Okay? But then the last reason that there's been a major decline in many of the mega churches here in the United States, major reason, is because of scandal and leadership issues. And I hate saying it. I don't gloat in that. I don't revel in that. It breaks my heart. Every time there's a church scandal, every time one of these leaders, falls, that's the term they like to use. Every time when they fall, there are thousands of people who are affected by that. folks who are embarrassed, folks who are emotionally devastated because they lifted their leader up in such a way that there was really no room for them to fall. And so when it happens, it's devastating for a lot of people. And so when they see these scandals, whether it's a financial scandal or too many times it's some sort of sexual scandal, whether it is adulterous, whether it is some situation, unfortunately, where there are children being abused, all of these things have happened way too often in these churches. And I've got some ideas about why. Again, when you get to a place where you've got absolute power and you begin to feel like there is no accountability, that no one can touch you, that you are above the laws that everyone else has to abide by, you'll do anything. We're seeing it right now in real time in the political arena. Okay, there is a former president whose name that I shall not name, who believes that they are above the law, and that they are one of these personalities. In many ways, many of these pastors are just like this former president. They have the same narcissistic character flaw. And they get to a place where they feel like they can grab them by the hoo-ha, or they can do whatever and fulfill their wildest desires. And when this happens, it scatters the people. And so that's at the top of the list, unfortunately. When people, and again, as a pastor, and some of you are pastors, I feel ashamed sometimes because I feel like many times people will lump us all together in one group. And when the pastor of a big church has an issue or a fall, then see, I told you, all of them are like that. And it's unfortunate. But, by the grace of God, some of us keep going and we keep teaching and preaching and covering and loving and doing all the things that we can do to demonstrate the love of Jesus Christ. But again, when these very high profile men fall into these situations, it really scatters the people. And it is at the top of the reason that many of the mega churches are really seeing the kind of decline that they are. And like I said, these personality cults, generally you think of them as political figures, again, but these same types of people find their way to the top to lead these very large Christian organizations. Okay. And so I live in Texas. I live in Dallas, Fort Worth. And again, when Sarah reached out to me, my friend Sarah, about this, it was because another young pastor, his name is Josiah Anthony, pastor of church up in one of our northern suburbs, Argyle, Cross Timbers Church. He stepped down and he cited that he was doing it because of some inappropriate and hurtful actions that he took. Okay. And the reason that conversation came up between Sarah and I is because Sarah and I were thinking about it, because since June, here in Dallas, just in Dallas-Fort Worth, we have had 4 megachurch pastors resign or be fired because of scandal. 4 in a matter of 2 months. Tony Evans, who, again, for, full disclosure, is my mother's pastor. I went to high school with Dr. Evans' daughters, Crystal and Priscilla. Some of you all know Priscilla Shirer, okay? Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, that has done tremendous work in Dallas-Fort Worth. I've got some differences of perspective regarding doctrine and theology and all of those kinds of things, but I can't take away from the thousands of people who've been positively impacted by their church. And Dr. Evans made an announcement that he was stepping down for some undisclosed sin from many years ago. And again, there's a whole lot of conversation that we could have about that. But that was devastating for us here in Dallas-Fort Worth. Right after that, Robert Morris, who founded Gateway Church, who is one of the churches that's got campuses all over, 50-some thousand members, found out that he'd had a sexual relationship with a 12-year-old. I'm not saying any of this for it to be scuttlebutt or gossip. All of this is already public knowledge. It's in the news. These things that it's already been put out there, okay? And so Robert Morris, he stepped down. Tony Camerata pastored a big church up in Frisco, which is a very affluent suburb here in Dallas. He stepped down, and he said it was some moral failure. A couple years ago, over at Watermark, which is a very, very large church here in North Dallas, that pastor, he didn't resign, and Dr. Evans didn't resign either. He said he stepped back. But the pastor at Watermark stepped back because of some sin. And so this is the point that I'm making. I'm actually, I think, going to make a couple of points here. Okay? When you get to that level of leadership and power and influence, everything gets thrown at you. The largest church I ever pastored was about 300 people, and everything was being thrown at me. So could you imagine you got 10,000 members? You can pick your sin. And so when you get to that level, if you don't have certain fail-safes and buffers and boundaries and accountability partners that are there to protect you from yourself. Oh, I'm preaching good right now. To protect you from yourself, you will find yourself buckling under the pressure, because there is an enormous performance pressure when you set yourself as a spiritual leader for thousands, maybe even millions, if you have the right television and radio and social media work going on. It's hard to hold that up, and too many times people in those offices are not allowed to be human. Many times, because of their ego, they want us to think that they are superhuman. I am not saying that about any of these men that I just spoke of. I am just speaking about what I know from my own experience. It's hard to let people know that you have a chink in your armor, that you have a weak spot, that you have proclivities. David did. Moses did. Okay. But in modern Christendom, we need perfection at the top. And very, very few people can live under that pressure. Are you all hearing me? And so, yeah, there's scandal, but we got to understand there is always a human being attached to the scandal. And the truth is if you had a larger audience, there might have been some scandal in your life. Y'all need to send me an offering. I'm teaching good on tonight. Okay? And so again, in these mega church environments, the mega church ecosystem, these people are so high up. They're so big. They're larger than life. And most of them cannot handle it. And the truth is that there are many other mega church pastors who have had scandal that never got out to the people or out to the media. They had things in place and they covered it up. Okay? But again, this is one of the reasons that I, as a pastor, with the influence that I have, try as best I can to be a human being before you and encourage you to know that just as you are divine, you are as much human and susceptible to mistakes, to failure, to falling. But thank God that there is enough grace, amen, that we can gather ourselves and continue on to do the work. But again, scandal is one of the greatest reasons that we're seeing decline in the megachurch. Okay, let me move on here, and forgive me y'all for going over. Let me try to get this done in about the next 7 minutes. Okay. One of the other things that I think is going on, and it's just because of where I live in my own awareness, I think that we are seeing such a major decline in the megachurch in the United States is because there's a shift in consciousness. People just see things differently now. COVID was a watershed moment in this country as it relates to religion and spirituality. I could talk a lot about that. But again, if you are paying attention, COVID, when the churches, the buildings got shut down, it caused a major shift in consciousness. People began to understand, wait a minute, I can get to God without going to the church house. I can hear, I can sense, I can move, I can commune, I can worship without being a part of a religious community. And once that switch was flipped on for many people, it was like, wait a minute, I get it now. I don't have to go back to what I used to do. And so there's been a shift in consciousness. And so the power dynamic has moved from these churches and spiritual leaders now to an individualized spirituality. People want, as Paul told the Philippians, work out your own soul salvation with fear and trembling so that you could do the work of the Lord. People just see it differently now. They recognize I don't need the church the way that I used to because I recognize I can commune with God in a very personal, individualized way. So there's a shift in consciousness there. The other thing that people see differently is that they recognize now the power imbalance. The power imbalance. They recognize it and they reject it. So for one person to have all of this power, it just didn't seem right to a lot of people. It just didn't seem right. It didn't feel right. And for many, because again, I don't know how they do everywhere else, but here in Texas, churches are almost like gangs. You know what I'm saying? You're a part of this church, and this is your pastor, and you better not say anything about my pastor. You know what I'm saying? We'll come to blows over it because they lift the man so high. They almost deify the man. And people who are thinking soberly are like, wait a minute, am I a part of a cult? And I don't even say that to be funny, but literally some people are like, wait, this is too spooky over here. They're putting him up too high and they're giving him their light bill money and they're doing all of this other strange stuff. I don't know that I want to be a part of this. And so there has been this shift in awareness, this shift in consciousness, whereas when there was a time when people were comfortable in those environments, this shift have caused them to think differently and morcellate this thing now and say, this stuff don't make any sense to me. I'm out. Okay? And so I think the other thing that is happening, and I'm so grateful for this. I just graduated from seminary in May, and I saw something there that I love. I love that there were just as many, maybe even more women in seminary than there are men. There's a shift in the power dynamic happening. And I believe that what we are seeing right now in the pastoral realm as well as in the political realm is that there is a shift to feminine energy being in leadership. I just believe it. I believe that it is a facet of God. It is a facet of the source of all that is revealing itself, because just as God is masculine, God is also feminine. And I think because of our own fragility as men, because of patriarchy, because of misogyny, there has been this oppression of feminine leadership. But I believe that it is breaking through right now. And the only way that women will take these leadership positions is for broken men to fall out of those positions. Are you all hearing me? I feel my help coming. Those of us who were raised by strong women, those of us who were raised in church communities that had strong mothers boards, or maybe even were raised up under a female pastor, understand that there is a different type of leadership that comes from a woman. And I don't know this to be true. It's just something that I'm sensing. It's something that I'm feeling. I feel that there is a shift that is taking place. And all of these women who are graduating with these MDivs and these doctorates in ministry and doctorates in education, they are coming. And they're coming as not just equals, but many times superior to the male leadership that they have been under. And so there's just this thing, I just feel it happening. And it's borne out in the numbers. When you look at mainline denominations like the United Church of Christ, literally half of the clergy in the United Church of Christ is female or identify as female. Half. In the United Methodist Church, I have so many Methodist friends that I went to Bright with. Even though it's a Disciples of Christ school, there were so many Methodist friends there that I met, and I loved seeing the shift in female clergy. Even when you look just in Protestantism as a whole, over 10% of pastors are women. And over the last 20 years, it has doubled and tripled in some instances. And I think that this is going to continue to happen. And again, for women to move into many of these leadership roles, it means that men are going to have to come out of them. And unfortunately, it happens in scandal. It happens for many other reasons. Okay, but there's a shift in consciousness that's happening. Today, I'm going to end with this. I didn't necessarily think that this was going to be an ode to my sisters, but maybe it is, okay? Because, again, I am well aware of the power of the feminine perspective. I'm well aware of the fortitude that comes with women leaders. I've seen it. I've experienced it. As I was studying this, as I said, most megachurch pastors are men, historically have been men. Of course, again, Amy Sibley McPherson, who founded the church back in 1923 in LA, was a woman, but we don't see it that often. For those of you who are familiar with my perspective, I'm kind of a New Thought Pentecostal, not kind of, that's what I am. I'm a New Thought Pentecostal, Metacostal person. Back in 1956, a lady named Dr. Johnny Coleman, she founded Christ Universal Temple up in Chicago. Huge church, like 20,000 members. Black lady, okay? Founded this big old church. They call her the mother of New Thought. And I think about the work that she did, leading 20,000 people. Says to me that a woman can lead those large congregations. I think about Reverend Dr. Elaine Flake up at Greater Allen. That's the name of it, Greater Allen Temple up in New York. She just retired because in the AME, when you get to 75, you have to retire. But they've got like 24,000 members. I think about people like Dr. Cynthia Hale. For those of you who live in Atlanta, may be or just familiar with womanist preaching in general. Dr. Cynthia Hale, she pastors Ray of Hope Church in Atlanta. Preaching machine. And there are others who are doing great work as senior leaders of very large churches. And I just think a shift is getting ready to happen. And so when I say that the megachurch is in decline, or I talk about the death of the megachurch in the United States, I'm talking about the death of the iteration of the church that we know now. In the future, I don't think that there will be as many super huge churches like there were back in the 80s and 90s. But I do think there will be large congregations led by women that will do great work. And I bring all of this up, table shakers, so that those women, those sisters that you know who have a call on their lives to lead, push them, encourage them, pray for them, clap for them, send them offerings, pay for their books, whatever you have to do to help our sisters get into the positions that they rightfully deserve to be in. Let God do something new and different in us. And men, those of us who are called to the pastorate or to leadership, let's make sure we have healthy egos, because the truth is that some of us need to be members at churches that are pastored by women. I said what I said, and I meant what I said. So, all in all, I ask that you pray for all of our churches. Pray for all of our leaders, men or women. It's hard, y'all. It's hard work. And the higher you go, the harder it becomes. So let's be careful to not judge folks who fall into scandal, because most of us can't handle that kind of weight. Let's pray for our pastors, okay? I love you all very much. I pray that if you want to support this ministry, you would do that. You can do that by going to Cash App, Will Horn Ministries, and do that. You can follow me on all the social media, the official Will Horn. I keep saying this, and I want to say it again because I'm super, super excited. I almost posted something today, but I got to wait. Y'all, I am so close to the official launch of the Shake the Table podcast. It's going to be available on Spotify and Apple, and we're going to be doing some great things. I got equipment here that's already. I've been having meetings with consultants and all of this kind of stuff. It's coming. And I really need you all who are supportive of this ministry to really connect officially with me. So if you would tonight, as soon as we get off, go to the official explorewillhorn.com. That's my website. Okay. And go and contact and give me your email address, because there's going to be information that's coming and so forth. And then also go to my YouTube. It's Shake the Table, and subscribe, click the bell so that you get all of the notifications when new videos are posted. We're getting ready to do some great things, and I want us to do it together. Okay. I love you guys so much, and I hope you have an amazing, amazing, amazing week. Y'all take it easy.